Hello, good afternoon, good evening, everybody. My name is Anthony DeSimone with my 10th edition of Penguins Pointers. So let's jump in and get started real quick. We're going to look at last night's game. If you didn't watch, the Penguins did fall short again, falling to the Carolina Hurricanes by the score of 3-2. It was an overtime loss, so the Penguins were able to rack up a point. As for the shots, they were kept under 30 shots. Again, they only had 25, but Carolina didn't do too well either with 21. Hits were up there for Carolina. The Penguins had 18, but the Canes had 23. A stat I left off, but was interesting when I was looking at the recap. The Penguins had 17 blocked shots last night to the Hurricanes' 13 blocked shots. So, I mean, that could be a reason why the shots were down, but something to note if you're wondering why we didn't have a lot of shots in last night's game. Power play was held off the board for the Penguins last night. They went 0 for 2. The Hurricanes were able to get a power play goal, and that was the game-winning goal in overtime, as they went 1 for 3 on the power play. Note, last night, Sidney Crosby was my highlight of last night's game, had 2 assists, both on the Penguins' goals. So, let me go through my thoughts about the last couple days and last couple games we've seen out of the Penguins. First and foremost, I'll put it out there, we've lost 3 of our last 4 games. The saving grace is that the overtime grants you 1 point. 2 of those 3 losses were overtime losses, so technically, in our last 4 games, we have averaged a point a night. We have 4 points. The problem is, they're overtime losses. Those are hard losses for teams to take, and the fact that you look at the stats and simply go, hey, we've lost 3 of our last 4, it's not exactly a morale booster for a locker room. And I mean, they played good games except for the second half of the Chicago series, but it's tough to get your motor running and to get into a groove when you can't consistently win or get a winning streak of 2 or 3 games in a row. And the Penguins haven't been able to do that this season, especially since we've had Mike Sullivan come in. But one of the reasons I think we're struggling is we're inconsistent, or the Penguins are inconsistent with their shots. So looking at the last 4 games, in the overtime loss last night, we had 25 shots. In another game, we had 32. We had 18 in the loss to the Chicago Blackhawks in the second half of that doubleheader. And then we had 30 in the overtime loss in the first game against Chicago. The 32 shots were from the Montreal game. That was the one I was skipping my mind. But so what you're seeing is we're having a lot of up and down nights on the shot department, and the games are kind of reflecting as such. The momentum is swinging around a lot. The losses are definitely one part of it. Excluding the overtime loss to Chicago, the 2 games we've lost, we were under 30 shots. And coming from a coaching style of Sullivan that wants shots on net, it's confusing me that we're getting under 30 shots. And the fact that we had 18 shots against Chicago, I mean, that was by far the most pitiful hockey game I've seen out of the Penguins this season. It looked like a minor league team was playing the Chicago Blackhawks. It really did. It was pathetic. But the fact that the shots are being very inconsistent probably is one of the reasons why we can't get a consistent 3 or 4 game winning streak, or like Chicago has an 8 game winning streak currently. But that's something I think the Penguins need to focus on, is getting some consistent shots each night. There's no reason that we can't have 30 shots a night, because let's be honest, in hockey there's no shot's a bad shot, and you guys saw last night evidence of that with Carolina's weird bounce off the boards goal that went over Fleury's back. I mean, there's no bad shot in hockey, so I don't understand why Pittsburgh is still struggling with this pass-happy mentality, because it honestly needs to go. If they want to get on some winning streaks, they got to put the puck on net, and they have to test the goaltender. Even the simple shots that go right to the glove or right to the pad of the goaltender still are effective, because you're making him make a save. And by making him make a save, you increase the chance that he can make a mistake. So just put the puck on net. It makes Patrick Hornquist's job easy, because then he can work on deflecting the puck when he's on the ice. It's simple. Just put the puck on net and stop passing it. because passes lead to turnovers, which lead to chances the other way. Anyway, my little rant about them not shooting enough is over. Let's move down. The penalty kill streak is over. They had gone 27 straight before last night's power play goal by the Carolina Hurricanes, which won the game. Very good to see out of the Penguins. Too bad the streak came to an end at an unfortunate time. But still, applause to the penalty killing staff, the players, and the coaches. That went really well, streak. It pulled the averages up in the NHL for them, and it helped us stay in some of these recent games where we could have easily been blown out of the water had we have allowed a power play goal or two. So, kudos to them. Lastly, the Penguins are still lacking a 60-minute effort. This was a problem they had last season when I was talking about this in my other blogs. It's just not. They don't play 60 minutes. I don't know if they're told the hockey game's 40 or if it's 55, but it's either one of two scenarios happen. A, we have the lead and we fall asleep in the last 5 minutes of the third and these teams crawl back in it. Or B, there's either a first or second period where we're just asleep. And last night I felt like it was the first period where the Penguins had nothing going. It was not exactly sloppy, but the fact that they only had 5 shots after the first period and the fact that Carolina was able to jump out to a 2-0 lead in the second was a real indication that they were not on their heels ready to go when the puck dropped last night. And I think that's a bit of a problem because when you don't play 60 minutes and you run into good hockey teams like Chicago that do play 60 minutes of hockey, the end result was what happened in that home-and-home series. They got the best of us in overtime, and then they went and beat the crap out of us when we went to Chicago because we couldn't get our motor running until the third period. That's something that needs to be addressed. I don't know how they're going to address it, but they have to remind their players, you guys are on the ice for 60 minutes. We want 60 minutes of effort, 60 minutes of diving for plays, 60 minutes of hitting on the boards, 60 minutes of solid passing, whatever the case is. They got to play 60 minutes if they want to win a hockey game. And so far, especially in these losses that I've seen, they've not played 60 minutes. Montreal was a good game. It was a 60-minute game. I felt they played well. If we go back a few weeks to when we beat the Islanders and Detroit back-to-back, I felt those were 2 60-minute games. But as of late, the 2 games against Chicago and the loss to Carolina, those 3 games they weren't 60 minutes. And that goes back to the inconsistency with shots. It seems like every night we see a different Penguin team. One night it's the Penguins that go out there, do their job, their scorers are on the ice, we score goals and we win. And then the next night it's like nobody showed up to the rink that day and we take a loss and it's frustrating. So whatever the issue is, I'm hoping that's something that gets addressed because you cannot make it and be successful in the playoffs if you're inconsistent. Even though they are 7-game series where you can have one flop on a game, you can't be inconsistent in the playoffs. Or if you even want to make the playoffs, you have to be consistent. You have to string together a win streak. And that's something I didn't put on the thoughts section, but that's something that needs to happen. We need to get a win streak going here. 3, 4, maybe even 5 games because we keep winning one and losing one, and that's not really moving us anywhere in the standings, and that's a good segue into the standings here. So let's take a look. The standings currently in first place for the Metro is the Washington Capitals, who are really running away in our division. 67 points in 42 games. Second and third place are tied. It's the Rangers and Islanders with 51. And then we move down to the Atlantic Division where it's a little bit of a tighter race. The Panthers' win streak finally came to an end, so they're halted at 57 points. Canadians are still holding on despite struggling without Carey Price. They have 51 points and are in second place. The Red Wings find themselves in third in the Atlantic with 49. A little bit of jumbling around in the Wildcard and in the Hunt sections. The Lightning now hold the 7th spot in the Wildcard with 48 points. The Bruins maintain their 8th spot with 47. The Devils find themselves now in the 9th spot with 47 points. The Penguins remain in 10th with 46. Senators and Hurricanes and Flyers round out the bottom 3 teams in the hunt. Now, it's interesting to look here. The difference between 13th and 7th place in our conference is a mere 5 points. This is what I was saying about if we were just to easily get a 3, 4, 5 game winning streak, we can kind of pole vault ourselves away from this thicket, if you will, of teams fighting for that 8th spot and maybe pull up a little better, maybe even steal a 3rd spot from the Islanders and bump the Islanders down into the wildcard section. But I mean, it's just you're playing a very tight and dangerous game with these teams trying to get those playoff spots. And I understand we're only halfway through the season, but at some point we got to start at least solidifying a position and getting some ground on these lower teams, no offense, like the Flyers, Hurricanes, and Senators, who I really don't think are going to make playoffs. I think of any of them. Well, the Senators might. I'll keep the Senators in there. But teams like the Hurricanes and the Flyers, I don't think they are playoff bound this year or have an opportunity to do well in the playoffs. But I think we do need to distance ourselves a little bit here. We're kind of just breezing by, and it's very frustrating considering we have a lot of good talent on our team. And years past, we find ourselves, fighting for the top spots in the Metro, and now we find ourselves in the hunt out of the playoffs. But allow me to reiterate, still only halfway through the season. There's still 82 games in a hockey season, so we've got a ways to go, and that could mean that, the Capitals come off the pedestal they're on and start losing, or the Penguins get a win streak rolling here, or it could mean something else, something worse happens, that the Penguins just continue to plummet, which I hope doesn't happen, but that can happen. So the one thing that, you cross your fingers and hope doesn't change is we stay injury-free so that we can keep these lines the same so we're not pulling out of Wilkes-Barre a ton. But despite them struggling to get wins onto their belt, they're still in the pack of fighting for the wild card. They're not down in the bottoms with Buffalo and Columbus. So we'll take it for what it's worth. Let's move over to the next game that is coming up. It is a road game, the last one before we come home. It'll be against the Tampa Bay Lightning. Tampa Bay's 22-17-4 with the 48 points. That gives them 4th place in their Atlantic Division. They hold the 7th wild card spot like we just showed you. Tampa Bay has Ben Bishop. He's a really tall goaltender. He is very solid in net, but they don't exactly have a super tough defense to get around, but they do bank on the fact that he is in net. With that said, Tampa Bay does like to play a little bit of an offensive style hockey game. So if you look over to the right, I do have the tips that I think the Penguins need to follow to win. And they are, you got to score first. The Penguins have not been scoring first in hockey games, and I think that's something that is really nipping at their heels, that the fact that they have to keep playing from behind. Get the first goal, establish yourself a lead, and build off of it. We can't keep trying to fight back in these games because that takes a lot of energy out of players. To come back from a 2-0 deficit against Carolina, that's tough. Especially when you're on the road. So give them credit that they've been able to do it and take these overtime losses, but getting that first goal is something that needs to happen. Second thing, 60 minutes of hockey. You got to play a complete hockey game if you're going to beat these teams, especially teams that are in the wild card spot and would like to hold on to it. So 60 minutes of hockey. And third, shoot first mentality. None of these pretty little ticky-tacky passes, none of these cross-ice passes, is dumping into the corner. Put the puck on net. Just shoot it at the goaltender. Make him make a save and hope he makes a mistake. So, just my 3 little tidbits that I think they need to follow if they do want to win this game. But this game will be Friday. After Friday, they're off Saturday, but have a doubleheader, not doubleheader, but back-to-back. They'll be home against Carolina at 3 o'clock on Sunday, then head to St. Louis Monday night for an 8 o'clock start. The rest of the games that week are Thursday. They will play the Philadelphia Flyers, and then next Saturday will be a home game against the Vancouver Canucks. So 4 games next week. That's going to be a bit of a challenge on that Sunday into Monday where they go on the road and come back. Hopefully they can get a win against Carolina on Sunday. Be a little bit of vengeance after the fact that we just lost to them. And it reiterates my point about the teams in the standings. These last 3 games, including the Carolina loss last night and the one coming up, they're against 2 teams that are fighting in the wild card with you. It'd be really nice if they could have gotten a win against Carolina and then beat them again Sunday to really push Carolina down in the standings and pull themselves up. So, hopefully, they'll be able to beat Tampa Bay on Friday, and hopefully they can go and come home, play Carolina with a victory there, give themselves 4 points, and get themselves out of this thicket of teams fighting for 2 wildcard spots. So, but I think if they follow those 3 tips and Fleury's on his game in terms of goaltending, we should be able to go into Tampa Bay and put up a decent fight. Hopefully we get a win, but I can't guarantee anything with the way the Penguins have been playing this season and how they've had a roller coaster of really good games and then pitiful losses. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up here. And thank you guys for listening in. Don't forget to hit that like button down below and subscribe if you haven't already. Catch you guys next time, and let's go Pens.